All right, welcome. Hey, everybody. It's GleeCon and bringing another episode at you here of Lore of Warcraft. We're starting our third chapter of the big first Chronicle book as we plug our way through, and we've now reached recorded history. So we now have years attached to a lot of these dates, and we're going to be progressing chronologically through time and eventually getting us to the Dark Portal, as you can see there, which is, I believe that's where Orcs and Humans begins, and that's when we'll start our Let's Plays. So Chapter 3 is all about ancient Kalimdor. The first one's called The Empire of Zul and the Awakening of the Aqir. This is 16,000 years before the Dark Portal comes. Here we go. For generation after generation, life bloomed across the ordered world of Azeroth. Nowhere was this more evident than in the dense woodlands around the Well of Eternity. The fount of Azeroth's arcane lifeblood accelerated the cycles of growth and rebirth. Before long, sentient beings evolved from the land's primitive life forms. Among the first and most prolific were the Trolls, a race of savage hunter-gatherers who flourished in Azeroth's jungles and forests. Though the Trolls were of only average intelligence, they possessed incredible agility and strength. Their unique physiology also allowed them to recover from physical injuries at an astonishing rate, and they could even regenerate lost limbs over time. The early Trolls developed a wide array of superstitious customs. Some practiced cannibalism and devoted themselves to warfare. A rare few sought knowledge through mystic practices and meditation. Still others honed their ties to a dark and powerful form of magic known as voodoo. Yet, no matter their individual customs, what all Trolls shared was a common religion that revolved around Kalimdor's elusive wild gods. The Trolls called these powerful beings Loa, and they worshipped them as deities. Due to their reverence for the wild gods, the Trolls gathered near a series of peaks and plateaus in southern Kalimdor. This was home to many of their honored Loa. The Trolls gave the holy mountain range the name Zandalar, and soon they built small encampments upon its slopes. The most powerful group of Trolls was called the Zandalar tribe. Its members claimed nearly all of Zandalar's tallest plateaus, believing them to be sacred ground. Atop the highest peaks, they constructed a small cluster of crude shrines. In time, these grew into a bustling temple city known as Zuldazar. Over the next several centuries, other tribes arose to challenge the Zandalari for territory and power. The most notable of these were the fearsome Gurubashi, Amani, and Drakari. The Gurubashi and Amani in particular laid claim to enormous swaths of land in Kalimdor's lush jungles and woods. On occasion, tribes clashed, often over hunting grounds, yet major conflicts were few and rarely lengthy. Trolls were such skilled and fierce fighters that any real conflict would cost both sides dearly. Untouched land was plentiful in all directions, and the various tribes quickly learned it was wiser to resettle than risk war. Only one place was forbidden by the tribe's witch doctors and priests. A small mound of blackened stone at the base of the Zandalar Mountains. The Loa warned the tribe's mystics of severe consequences should they disturb the black stones. For many years, none of the Trolls dared disobey, but curiosity eventually won out. A group of rebellious Trolls plumbed the forbidden mound. They discovered that the black stones were not mere rocks, they were the jagged hide of a monstrous creature. None of the Trolls had ever seen anything like it. They believed it to be an undiscovered Loa, and a powerful one at that, considering that the other spirits were frightened of it. The Trolls performed vile rituals and living sacrifices to awaken the slumbering monstrosity. Roused by the blood offerings, a gigantic Cathraxi general emerged from its long slumber and ruthlessly slaughtered all those who had revived it. The Trolls were unaware that this was Kithix, the being who had survived the encounter with Keeper Tyr. Gravely wounded, the Cathrax had fled southwest to what would be known as the Zandalar Mountains before collapsing into a deep hibernation. Reeling from its presence, the ancient Loa inhabiting the area had buried Kithix beneath the earth so that no other creature would disturb it. The awoken Cathrax looked upon Troll civilization with contempt, for it was but a pale shadow of the Black Empire of eons past. Kithix knew it would delight the old gods to see this pitiful civilization rent to ashes. The Cathrax reached out with its mind and found a race of creatures it could control, the Aqir. In the ages after the fall of the Black Empire, these insectoids had remained hidden in small warrens and tunnels beneath the ground. Kithix rallied the Aqiri swarms, driving them to make war and establish their dominance over Azeroth once again. As the Cathrax expanded its power and recovered, the insectoids began building a vast subterranean empire known as Aqir. Kithix patiently watched and waited as the Aqiri ranks swelled in number. When the time was right, the Cathrax led the insectoids from their underground empire and they swept across the land. The The Trolls' experience as hunters made them formidable foes, but the Aqiri threat was unlike any they had ever faced. Numerous smaller tribes fell before the unrelenting insectoids' legions. As the Aqir encroached perilously close to the Zandalar Mountains, the Zandalari moved to act. They united the disparate troll tribes into a single mighty force which they called the Empire of Zul. The members of this newly forged society would put aside their differences and work together to destroy the Aqir. The Zandalari took on the role of commanding the troll armies. With their temple city looming high in the mountains, they could detect enemy movements and direct attacks at weak points. Under the Zandalari's guidance, the other trolls used ambush tactics in the surrounding jungles to whittle down the enemy's numbers. Elsewhere, revered priests summoned the Loa to assail their enemies. These ferocious wild gods joined the troll warriors in battle, ripping through the Aqiri ranks and even wounding Kithix. The Aqir were forced to retreat before they could mount a proper siege on the sacred mountains. Kithix, gravely wounded by the Loa, fled to the northeast with a contingent of its closest Aqiri followers. There it planned to regain its strength while the insectoids continued their war against the trolls. Though they had driven the Aqir away, the Zandalari knew that their enemy still posed a grave threat. The insectoids, if left unchecked, would attack outlying troll territories. At the Zandalari's behest, the other tribes moved out to hunt down the Aqir. The trolls quickly learned it was not enough to simply kill the insectoids. If any Aqir escaped underground, they would establish a new colony and rise up again later. To permanently end the threat, no corner of the continent could be left unguarded. Thus, the Zandalari convinced the most power-hungry troll factions to establish new strongholds across Azeroth. Chief among these groups were the Amani, Gurubashi, and Drakari. After defeating the Aqir, they could claim the fertile new lands for themselves without any competition. The ambitious tribes readily agreed. The Drakari pushed into the frigid north against a colony of Aqir, but the trolls faced a weapon they had never expected: corrupted Tol'vir. A small group of the Titan-forged who dwelled outside Ulduar had been captured and enthralled by the Aqir. These ferocious stone Tol'vir, known as obsidian destroyers, almost overpowered the Drakari, but years of battle had shaped the tribe into cunning fighters, and they devised brilliant ways to topple and shatter their foes. The Gurubashi also encountered corrupted Titan-forged. These trolls had ventured southwest, where the Aqir had overrun Ankaraj, a prison complex housing the old god Cthulhu. Upon infiltrating the stronghold, the insectoids had enslaved the Anubisoth giants who guarded the prison. Early engagements between the Gurubashi and the Aqir proved disastrous for the trolls. The insectoids and their mighty Anubisoths slaughtered several large Gurubashi encampments. Thereafter, the Zandalari instructed Gurubashi priests to separate their tribe into smaller, more mobile raiding groups instead of large armies. This new tactic allowed them to constantly harass the Aqir, bleeding the insectoid armies dry over a period of many years. Though they were never able to completely wipe out the Aqir, the Gurubashi eventually won uncontested control of the surrounding territory. Meanwhile, the Amani had set out to destroy Kithix. They tracked the Cathraxis trail far to the northeastern woodlands, cutting through an unending mass of Aqiri guardians. In a final savage battle, the entire tribe flung itself in a suicidal attack against Kithix and its remaining insectoid minions. Only a tiny fraction of the troll army survived. Even so, the Cathrax succumbed to its tireless hunters. Though the cost was high, the fearsome reputation of the Amani became legend among the other tribes. Atop the site where they had killed Kithix, the trolls established a new settlement. It would one day grow into a sprawling temple city known as Zul-Aman. With the Cathrax gone, the Aqir no longer fought with as much ferocity or purpose. The war between the trolls and the Aqir shifted dramatically. Extermination of the Aqir became the trolls' new imperative. After many centuries of brutal fighting, the trolls shattered the Aqir Empire, containing the insectoids in the far northern and far southern reaches of the continent. Central Kalimdor was permanently scoured of their presence. The surviving Aqir fortified their underground colonies against further troll aggression. They showed no more interest in fighting. In time, the trolls proclaimed themselves victorious. Without war to bind them together, the troll factions grew ever more distant and insular. The far-flung strongholds of the different tribes blossomed into vibrant homes, temple cities, and eventually empires in their own right. The Zandalari withdrew to their mountain plateaus to pursue spiritual knowledge, but they would always maintain an immense influence over the disparate troll societies. And here we have a subset: the Nerubians, Kiraji, and Mantid. Three distinct cultures would arise from the Aqir Empire. The insectoids in the north gathered near the underground prison of Yogg-Saron. Due to their proximity to the old god, these Aqir would gradually evolve into a race called the Nerubians. Their kingdom would become known as Azjol-Nerub. The Aqir in the southwest made their home in Ankaraj, the conquered prison complex of Cthulhu. The captive old god's foul presence would slowly warp the Aqir's forms over time, molding them into a race known as the Kiraji. The Aqir in the southeast congregated where Isharge's essence still polluted the land. These insectoids would eventually transform into a race called the Mantid. Even before the Aqir Empire fell, they would establish the great colony of Mantives near the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. And here we have a picture of the Zandalari troll capital, Zul'Dazar, familiar to all of us who have played Battle for Azeroth expansion. That's the capital of the Horde. And of the Zandalari trolls, probably my favorite race, definitely up there for me, one of the coolest races. All right, a lot of cool things, a lot of things that we've kind of hinted at throughout the story has now been officially made canon. You have the different empires of the trolls, which you'll hear about all throughout the different lands, the games, different expansions, all of them. So you have the North, the Wrath of the Lich King, that kind of eventually set up in the Zuldrak region. You have the Wild Gods becoming known as the Loa. You have the Staggered Plateau temples that you see all throughout these regions, that being established here in lore. So they've mentioned multiple times the other troll types, the Gurubashi, the Drakari, and the Amani, as well as the Zandalari. So the Zandalari we know that exists, eventually gets set apart in the Broken Isles kind of region in BFA. That's the center of the world, really. You have the Drakari. They go to the north, Drak Theron, that zone in Northrend, and you know that they've established here they're going to kind of chase the Yogg-Saron, Azjul Nerub type of insectoids, the Aqir. You have the Gurubashi. If you think Gurubashi Arena, it says that they're the ones that go down and fight. I guess it sounds like in Kalimdor, although that might get split and be the same ones you find in Stranglethorn Vale. Those are the Gurubashi to the south. And the trolls that are actually the main ones that you can be when you choose classic trolls. Those go down and they fight where Ahn'Qiraj and Cthulhu come. So those are the classic trolls. You have the Amani, which those are sort of the Eastern Kingdom trolls, up in the hinterlands and those type of regions. And actually, I believe the region that they talk about in the north, Zulaman, I think that might be the region in Outlands expansion that is kind of dead now, but used to be right there in the no-fly zones by the Bloodlands or whatever it's called, where the Blood Elves can come out of. And it says those people in the southeast, Aqir in the southeast, eventually break off into the Mantids. So that's interesting. I never made the connection that the Mantids were the same kind of insectoid races created by the old gods. So that's an interesting take on that. I mean, I guess it makes sense. They're insects. All right, so a lot of cool things, a lot of things that we've hinted at and I've talked about. This is probably what's happening. This is probably what's happening. And here we've officially stated we have our 3 real regions of insectoids. We have the Kalimdor, Ahn'Qiraj, we have the Northrend set, and then we have the Mantids that break off. And we have the 4 different troll main things, groups, tribes, and why they're spread all over. Very cool stuff. Yeah, long one. That was a long one to read. All right, I'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you, as always, for your time, for your patience. And I look forward to learning some more on the next one. See ya.